Okay, students, so today we are going to talk about using the phrase or the word would and used to. Now, I know this word looks kind of weird because it's pronounced used, like I used the bathroom. But in English, for some reason, we pronounce it with like a T at the end instead of a D when it's next to this to. I used to. Kind of like you don't even say the D at all. I used to. And would. So, used to and would are different ways to talk about the past. Like, I used to walk my dog every day. Or, we used to take the bus to work. Or, they would go out of town every weekend. She would help me on the weekend. So all of these are talking about the past. So this is how you make it. So all we need to do is have the person or thing you are talking about. So we use I or you or he, she or it, we or they. And you put it next to used to or would, so it can be one of the two, and then you put the verb. You don't need to change the verb or anything, it's just the simple present form of a verb. So for example, this sentence says, I used to live with my family. So we have the I right here. We just took it from up here. You just have to pick I, you, he, she, it, we, or they. So we used I, and then this one uses used to, and then live. That's the only thing you need to do to put it together. And then you have the rest of the sentence. I used to live with my family. Things like that. Or they would drive to work together. So instead of using I, it uses they, it uses would, and the verb drive, which is, it's not, the past tense isn't in this verb, it's in would or used to. And this one, my supervisor would buy us lunch on Fridays. So buy is the verb, but would is telling us that it's past. It's past tense, and we used my supervisor, which could be he, she, or they, if we don't know if they are a girl or a boy, or if they like to be called a girl or a boy. So, this is how you, more ways on how you make it and use it in a sentence. So used to and would do not change if you are saying I or you or any of the types of people or things that you can talk about. So for example, when we were talking about she does not, instead of saying like we do not, when we say she does not, we put the S at the end. For present, that's changing something. We have to put an S at the end, or we have to change it from past or present tense. You don't have to do any of that with these. You don't have to worry about any of that. So it's just I used to, you used to, he used to walk, she used to walk, it used to walk, we used to walk, they used to walk. You don't have to change anything for used to. And would does not need to change either. It's just I would walk, you would walk. It's all the same no matter who you're talking about. So that's really nice that you don't have to change any of it. So used to and would are past tense. So they're telling us when you use them to talk about the past, that's what they're for. Would can be used in other types of sentences to talk about different things, but we're going to talk about that later. But for right now, would and used to are what we use to talk about the past. Used to and would let us know that whatever we are talking about happened in the past. So I used to work in a grocery store. So this sentence is telling us that in the past, I worked in a grocery store. But instead of saying I worked in a grocery store and saying it past tense, you could say I used to work in a grocery store. Now, I know in English it's hard because a lot of the stuff that we say can be said in lots of different ways. So, I used to work in a grocery store and I used to work in a grocery store are both past tense, and they're telling us that whatever happened happened in the past, and it happened a lot, just like we learned with the past tense. I worked, it's at any point in the past. And when you say I used to work in a grocery store, that is also in the past, and there isn't really much of a difference in English. But it's something that English speakers use a lot. You'll hear this a lot and you'll read it a lot. I think you'll hear it more than you'll read it, but it's something that just to let you know that you don't have to worry about, oh, do I say I worked in a grocery store or I used to work in a grocery store. Either of these versions can be used, and it doesn't really make a difference in English, but this will help you understand what people are saying. So this one, I would ride my bike every day. Again, this one is just saying that it's past tense. You could also say, instead of saying I would ride my bike every day, you could say I rode my bike every day, right? Because ride is an irregular verb, so it changes to rode when it's in the past. So you could say I rode my bike every day, and that would be past tense. Or you could say I would ride my bike every day, and it's telling us that it's still past tense. Again, the difference between saying I would ride my bike every day and I rode my bike every day, it's not enough for you to worry about it right now. It's something that it's hard to describe why they're different and why people use them in different ways. But all you need to know right now is if you hear somebody say this, they're just talking about the past. So used to and would are different, and they're used differently. So they both tell us that what is happening is in the past, but you can't use the same kind of verbs for both of them all the time. So used to tells us about a past action or something that happened before right now that happened a lot. So it's something in the past that would happen a lot, but does not happen now. So a lot of people use used to when they talk about what it was like being a kid. Like, I used to eat dinner with my family every night when I was a kid. Or when I was a child, I used to play with my cousins every day. That's the kind of things that we use it to talk about. Or a past fact that is not true now. So that's another reason we use used to, is when we're talking about something that's a fact that was in the past that isn't true now. So for example, if you said, I used to live in Mexico, it's telling us that that was something that happened that was a fact, but it isn't true now because you live in a different place. So you would only say that if you lived in a different place. Or you could say, I used to live in Provo, but now I live in Salt Lake City. So you can say those kinds of things. So that's what used to is used for. Would is a little bit different, but also the same. So would also we use it to talk about a past action that happened a lot, but does not happen now. So these two, used to and would, are used the same way when you talk about this. But would can only be used with action verbs like ran or sit or do. Those are the kinds of verbs that it can be used with. It can't be used with verbs like live when you're talking about the past, or belong, I would belong. You can't use it to talk about with those verbs. So if you're thinking about, can I use it with this verb? It's a little bit complicated. So I think that the easiest thing for a lot of you to do is just use simple past tense, like I lived in California, or I worked at a grocery store. If you're using would or used to, it's a little bit harder to know which one's which and which one is right, and it's a little bit harder to use. But when you hear somebody else say it, just remember that whatever they're saying, used to and would, all it means is they're just talking about the past, about something that happened a lot and doesn't happen now, or is a past fact that is not true anymore, or is not true now. So that's the difference. So a little bit more on how they are different. So used to talks about a past action that happened a lot but does not happen now. So for the example, I have this sentence right here. When I was a child, my dad and I used to go fishing on the weekend. So for this sentence, it's telling us that we're talking about something in the past. So this sentence doesn't need to have this when I was a child, but it helps you understand that what we're talking about is in the past. When I was a child, my dad and I used to go fishing on the weekend. So this is something that happened in the past. My dad and I go fishing on the weekend. It was in the past, and it happened a lot, but it doesn't happen now. So that's why we say used to. Or you can use used to for a past fact that is not true now. So for example, I used when I was a child, I used to live in Cuba. So that's another way that you can use it, is when it's something that was a fact and not something that used to happen a lot, but something like where you lived, how you thought about things, or who you lived with, like that kind of, those kinds of things are facts that happened in the past and instead of actions in the past. But you can use them for this one or that one if you're using used to. When you're using would, it's always going to be a past action that happened a lot but does not happen now. So for example, this sentence is, when I was a child, my dad and I would go fishing on the weekend. So if you'll see, it's the same sentence that we used in this one. We just use would instead of used to. So you can use it for the same thing in this case when you're talking about something in the past that happened a lot but does not happen now. It can only be used with action verbs. These are verbs that are actions you can do with your body and people can see. They do not talk about state of being or possession. So state of being is like your emotions or feelings, like I think, I saw, those kinds of things. You don't use it with those. Or possession verbs like belong or am, like those kinds of verbs, you can't use them with. So for example, this one, I would run to school in the mornings. The verb run is something that you do with your body and people can see. Like if somebody said, show me what it looks like to run, you could run. And that would show them that that was an action verb. But if you said to somebody, show me what it looks like to think, you can't really show that because it's something that happens in your brain. And it's something that we're doing all the time. So it's not really something you can like show somebody or act out. Then it's not an action verb. So that's why run is an action verb and you can use would with it. But if you said, when I was a child, I would live in Texas, that's not right, because live is a state of being, right? It's something that you are doing in a place. It's a fact. I used to live in Texas. That's how you would use it correctly. Or I lived in Texas. Those are both past tense. I lived in Texas, or I used to live in Texas, are both past tense. And this sentence, I would think about my family a lot. Again, that one's not correct, because it's the verb think is a state of being. It's not something that you can act out or show somebody. So you can't use would with it. You could say, I used to think about my family a lot. Or you could say, I thought about my family a lot. So would and used to really just tell us that what we are talking about, the action or the past action that we're talking about, is something that happened a lot. That's all it's saying, is how frequently, how often it would happen. So that's all that's telling us. And would can't be used with things like live or think, things that are facts or things that are about how you feel, or things that you can't really see, that are verbs like think or belong. Those kinds of things that you can't use would for. So I'm going to practice by showing you some more sentences. So this sentence says, last year I would take the tracks to work. So since we used would instead of last year I took the tracks to work, would tells us a little bit more than I took the tracks to work. Both are past tense, but this one tells us that you did it a lot. Last year I would take the tracks to work, meaning you did it every time you went to work. This one says, last year I used to take the tracks to work. So you'll see that both of these sentences are the same, and the only difference is this sentence says would and this one says used to. So both of these can be used one or the other, and they mean the same thing. They're both past tense, and both of them let us know that whatever is happening in the sentence used to happen a lot in the past. The next sentence, my children used to live in California. So my children used to, we need to use used to and not would, because we use the verb live, because it's something that's a fact. It's something that they are doing that you can't really act out. So my children used to live in California. So this sentence, it's the same one, my children would live in California, but we know that that's not correct, because we can't use the verb live or things that involve how you feel, or what, or a fact like I live here or I work there. Those don't really work with would. This sentence says, I would go to the store on my way home from work, but now my son goes to the store for me. So this sentence is long. We're going to read it again. I would go to the store on my way home from work, but now my son goes to the store for me. So, this is an example of a sentence that tells us things that you can't really say in regular past tense, and this is why we use it in English. So I would go to the store on my way home from work. So this part of the sentence right here is saying that whatever is happening, which is me going to the store on my way home from work, tells us that it's something that's in the past that I did a lot. But now my son goes to the store for me. So this part of the sentence is saying, but right now in the present, my son goes to the store for me. So instead of me going to the store all the time, it's my son that does it. If you said, I went to the store on my way home from work, but now my son goes to the store for me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense in English, because when you say I went to the store on my way home from work, I went is past tense, but it doesn't really say how often you would go, how much you would go to the store on your way home from work. And it also, I went, could be I went today, like earlier. I went to the store on my way home from work, but now my son goes to the store for me. When you say I would or used to, it lets people know that it's something that's in the past that happened a lot. So that's why when you're talking about something in the present, it lets people know that this part of the sentence, I would or I used to go to the store on my way home from work, is something that happened a lot in the past. So when you talk about something in the present, people are able to connect them better in English when they're listening to you talk, rather than saying, I went to the store on my way home from work. In their head, they could be like, oh, that could have been 20 minutes ago, that could have been yesterday, or it could have been 2 years ago. So that's why would and used to are good to use in English, because it tells people that whatever it was in the past, but it also is something that happened a lot. So that's why we use it in English. And that's why it's different from just using the past tense. So sometimes, like this sentence, last year, I took the tracks to work, instead of saying I would take the tracks to work, those two sentences aren't really that different. They're not different. And you can use one or the other and people will understand them the same. But if you use it in this kind of sentence, it does make a difference. So that's why we use it when you're trying to talk about something that happened in the past that happened a lot. And it's important that they know that it happened a lot. So that's why we use it in English. But when you're listening to people, all you really need to know is that would and used to, when you hear these, it just means the past. That's all it means. And would, it means some other things, but for right now, just focus that would and used to just mean the past. My family and I used to work at the same company. So, again, this sentence is telling us that used to happens a lot. So my family and I used to work at the same company a lot in the past. But now it's not the case. It doesn't happen anymore. So knowing when to use would or used to is hard. It's really, really hard to know when to use them because it's hard to know the difference when you're learning English. So like I said, all you really need to remember is the big one that you need to remember when you're talking about the past is simple past. So you need to remember how to put ed at the end of words, or changing irregular verbs like ride to rode, or when we use was instead of am or is. Those are the big ones that you need to remember, because those are the ones that you can use a lot, and would and used to are ones that help you talk about your feelings or things that happened in English better, but they're not really important as, or they're not as important as knowing to add an ed or change the irregular verb or say was instead of is. Those are the ones that you need to remember. And this one is helpful to learn because a lot of English speakers use this and they don't think that they're hard to use, but they use them anyways. And so it makes it a little more difficult. So all you really need to know is would and used to are past tense, and they talk about something that happened in the past that used to happen a lot. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions.